We're in a recession, we at war, and all we want to do is continue to be negative. It's more like, I feel like the fans from the UK show me more love than when I'm in my own country, and that's crazy. I gotta go to another country to get more love, and I don't even get this type of love. I get more love from another country than I get from my own country, and that's crazy. But one thing I understand, if you're rich, you're a rich nigga. If you're poor, you're a poor nigga. If you're educated, you're a smart nigga. At the end of the day, they still look at me as a nigga. And that's something that I understand. Just truthfully speaking right here.
America, made up for America. What has America done for me? Nothing, but made me a zombie. I don't know who I am. I try to act like somebody else. No name, no violence, no culture. Got our women acting like some anti-mamas, demons, sapphires. Got our men acting like second section. Mankind molars, Willie Beckton from Rock, Texas. What has America done for me? Nothing, but made me a zombie. Took away my uncle's life. Gave me some brunches of dead white man hanging from it. Teaching us about Mary had a little lamb. Mary was white, the lamb was white, and what about old Snow White? Old Mother Hubbard went to the public to give her poor dog a bone. I lied. She gave the dog a steak and gave the bones to Negroes. Neck bones, pig feet, ham hocks, chitlins, guts. Made us gut eaters, whiskey consumers, soap users, Uncle Tom niggas. That's what America done for me. Made me a robot, a Frankenstein, a puppet. What has America done for me? Nothing. What made me a zombie? Integration, segregation, humanization, emasculation, frustration, and complete annihilation. If you are seeking a just education, we are taught to hate ourselves. That everything right is right. We are taught to hate ourselves. Everything we learn is right. Jack and Dale is right. Dick and Jane is right. Little Bo Peep is right. Little Jack Horner is right. Little Red Riding Hood is right. History is right. Civics is right. Math is right. Spelling is right. Social studies is right. Santa Claus is right. And he coming down from Black Chimney. Shout out to all the black people who hate themselves. America, America, why did you bring us here? America, America, why did you bring us here? Let's play. Make us work for no pay. Yeah, for no pay. Work all day for no pay. America, America, why did you bring us here? America, America, why did you bring us here? America, America, America. America, 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 America.
So what is your position specifically on reparations? I asked the question because Elizabeth Warren, Julian Castro, they've indicated they want to support.
What does that mean? What do they mean? I'm not sure that anyone's very clear. What I've just said is that I think we must do everything that we can to address the massive level of disparity that exists in this country.
I'll tell you what they mean, because Elizabeth Warren has said black families have had a much steeper hill to climb. We need systematic structural changes to address that. Julian Castro has said, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that, reparations.
Well, I agree with what Elizabeth said.
So you would support reparations?
But read what she said. What does that mean? She means, I think, I don't want to put words into her mouth, is what I said. Okay? In other words, as a result of the legacy of slavery, you have massive levels of inequality. It has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed now.
In 2016, you said it would be divisive, reparations.
Well, again, it depends on what the word means. And I know you don't want to be divisive tonight.
Looking for the excuse. What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it? Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
That's a part of it, and that grows out of something else. You can't thingify anything without depersonalizing that something. If you use something as a means to an end, at that moment you make it a thing and you depersonalize it. The fact is that the Negro was a slave in this country for 244 years. That act, that was a willful thing that was done. The Negro was brought here in chains, treated in very inhuman fashion. And this led to the thingification of the Negro. So he was not looked upon as a person. He was not looked upon as a human being with the same status and worth as other human beings. And the other thing is that human beings cannot continue to do wrong without eventually rationalizing that wrong. So slavery was justified morally, biologically, theoretically, scientifically, everything else. And it seems to me that white America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. And that can never be overlooked. So I think these things are absolutely necessary. The other thing is that America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Another thing about how perspectives change over time. Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, "I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill." You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
And by the way, we talk about this mostly in terms of Black Lives Matter. Black lives really do matter. But the problem is institutional racism in America. That's the overarching problem that still exists. And we should be talking about it. And you look at it, the legacy of racism in housing and jobs and so on.
Darius Perkins was released from prison in early July, having served 23 years of a 35-year mandatory minimum sentence for selling crack cocaine. In 2018, a new law retroactively reduced such long sentences for crack cocaine offenses.
I ain't gonna try to play no victim, but 35 years was harsh.
The US has the highest prison population in the world. Incarceration exploded in the 80s with the beginning of the so-called war on drugs. And because black communities are intensively targeted by law enforcement, it was African Americans who were arrested and jailed disproportionately, even though white drug use was equal or more than that of blacks. Joe Biden took credit for the 1986 law that mandated the same sentence for 5 grams of crack possession as 500 grams of cocaine. And he followed that with the 1994 crime bill, which mandated federal mandatory life sentences for repeat drug offenses and encouraged U.S. states to do the same. The devastation of African American communities through the drugs crackdown was apparent, yet it rejected recommendations to end the sentencing disparity for crack and ignored calls to focus more on crime prevention than punishment.
We do everything but hang people for jaywalking in this bill.
Mandatory minimum sentences passed during Joe Biden's tenure increased the federal prison population by about 800%. And there's a pretty direct correlation between mandatory minimum sentences and federal prison growth. I think the causal link is pretty clear and undeniable.
I don't speak as a Democrat or a Republican, nor an American. I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. If you go to jail, so what? If you're black, you were born in jail. North as well as the South. Stop talking about the South. As long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're South. This is why I say it's the ballot or the bullet. It's liberty or it's death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody. America today finds herself in a unique situation. Historically, revolutions are bloody. Oh yes, they are. They have never had a bloodless revolution or a non-violent revolution. That don't happen even in Hollywood. You don't have a revolution in which you love your enemy. And you don't have a revolution in which you are begging the system of exploitation to integrate you into it. Revolutions overturn systems. Revolutions destroy systems. A revolution is bloody. But America is in a unique position. She's the only country in history in a position actually to become involved in a bloodless revolution. All she's got to do is give the black man in this country everything he's doing. Everything. I hope that the white man can see this. Because if you don't see it, you're finished. If you don't see it, you're going to become involved in some action in which you don't have a chance. We don't care anything about your atomic bomb. It's useless. Because other countries have atomic bombs. When 2 or 3 different countries have atomic bombs, nobody can use it. So it means that the white man today is without a weapon. If you want some action, you got to come on down to earth. And there's more black people on earth than there are white people on earth. It'll be the ballot, or it'll be the bullet. It'll be liberty, or it'll be death. And if you're not ready to pay that price, don't use the word freedom in your vocabulary.
dang, in the black community, we don't have anything that says I'm an adult now. That's all those things have been stripped from us when we were brought here to America, right? And so there's nothing that says, okay, you're an adult. Like there's quinceañeras for Spanish people. There's, bar and bat mitzvahs for others. White people just inherit land and get their businesses. Everybody has something, but we don't have anything that says you're an adult. And I was talking with, some of my friends, and they're like, hey, I've been to jail 3 times. I'm a grown man. That don't make you no grown man just because you went to jail. That means that makes you a bad criminal.
That's right.
You're not good at crime.
That's right.
what that makes you. Stupid. So I felt like, I wanted to do something to show my people that, like, if you dig, like I went ahead and did my 23andMe, and everything my father said was true. Everything my mama said was not true. She think that we like Blackfoot, Indian, Navajo, or something like that. Ain't no Native American. No Blackfoot Indian. Unless those Blackfoots came from Africa, from Nigeria, and came here, and then they was like, we got here before Christopher Columbus, and then which probably is what happened. But there's no Native American in my blood. But I got that East African. I got some European. I got some Hebrew. I got all these things in me. So I said I'm gonna honor it. I'm gonna take advantage of this. I'm gonna learn the Hebrew. I'm gonna study the religion, and it's not that far off from like Jehovah's Witnesses, where I grew up around, and Baptist church. It's not that far off. And I don't know if you ever been to a temple, to a Jewish temple, but you gotta go because they be in there singing. Okay,
Really?
They sang
Like black gospel choir singing?
No, I don't know about like black gospel choir singing, but they sang. They get it in. They're like, yeah, Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu. Like they get it in. They get it in. I'm like, okay, I can rock with this.
Did you get any backlash to that at all? Because I know sometimes black people like, now we Baptist or we Catholic or.
Yes, some people have said things like, oh no, you black, that's what you are. You black, you Christian, you this. You don't know, because there's black everything.
Right.
There's black people all over the world, and religion is one thing, and blood is another thing.
You can choose your religion.
You can choose your religion. And
we original man and woman anyway.
That part.
Yeah.
That part.
Yeah.
And when you do your real true research about the Hebrews and the Jews and the Israelites and all that, you find out that they look a lot like us sitting in this room right now. So maybe somebody stole some of the Jewish religion. Anyway, let me shut up. I'm about to be like some people stole from the get-go, but...
When they talk about Jews, people, you gotta realize, the first Jews were black.
Jews.
Yes.
Not
Israelites.
Jews.
The Jews.
Yeah.
The Jews. The Jews were black.
Right. Wow. It's deep.
The black man and black woman, if the seed runs wild in the womb of the black woman or mutates, from that mutation she can even produce an albino, something that is 180 degrees different from both of them. In that black man and black woman, you can find brown, you can find red, you can find yellow, and you can even produce that which is whiter than white. That is why when you go among black people, I know it's been amazing and it's really, really puzzled most white folks here in the audience, is to see so many shades of black people. And all of them supposed to be black. Here's one black. Here's another one medium black. Here's another one light black. Here's another one teas and tan. Here's another one caramel brown. Here's another one that's bright, as they say, damn near white. And another one whiter than that. Here comes another one with blue eyes. Here comes another one with green eyes. Here comes one with brown eyes. You say, wow, these people look like everybody. Why do these black people look like everybody? You can go among the black people and you can find the likeness of the Chinese there. You can go among the black people and find the likeness of the Japanese there. You can go among the black people and find the likeness of the European among them. Why is this? Because the black man and the black woman are absolutely the original people of the planet Earth. We are indeed your father and your mother. And you would not be here if it were not for us.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, let me, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 out of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it. Every single American. And you should get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants. That's who we are. That's why we're who we are. That's what makes us different, and we should invest in them.
Thank you.
Wealth inequality actually are even more pronounced when we look at the Black American community. It's interesting to note how dramatic the differences are between Black and white wealth in the United States. The typical Black family has about 10 cents to the dollar of net worth that the typical white family has in its possession. And if we think about the actual numbers here, we're talking about a distinction between $17,000 for the median Black family. That's the Black family at the middle of the wealth distribution among Blacks versus $176,000 for white families in the middle of the wealth distribution for all white households. That's a very dramatic and striking difference, and it's not explained in the standard ways that people think about this. So one of the obvious explanations that people give for these kinds of dramatic or glaring wealth disparities is to argue that it must be attributable to the fact that Black folks are not as eager to acquire education, and so education reduces the amount of wealth. Here's the key point, though. We found that Blacks with a college degree actually have 2/3 of the net worth of whites who have never finished high school. Another argument that's made is, well, wealth tracks income. So if we looked at Black folks with higher levels of income, they would have comparable levels of wealth with whites. This isn't true either. Black Americans whose incomes fall in the middle of the American income distribution have lower levels of wealth than whites who are in the poorest 20% of the American wealth, of the American income distribution. Some people say it's because of a lack of financial literacy, but there's absolutely no evidence to demonstrate that people at comparable levels of income, Black or white, have very different degrees of financial literacy. But if they are Black or white, they have very different levels of wealth. Finally, some people have argued that these kinds of disparities are attributable to family structure differences between Blacks and whites. Well, the evidence, on the other hand, tells us that Black families with two parents have 2.5 times less of the wealth than white families with a single parent. So we have to craft a very different narrative to explain these kinds of disparities. And the narrative that I would like to craft focuses on the historical conditions in the United States. Historical conditions that are associated with the way in which white supremacy has played out in this country. So I would begin that narrative by talking about the failure to provide Black Americans with 40 acres that were promised in the aftermath of the Civil War. That's the beginning of the process of distinctive racial patterns of wealth inequality in the United States.
policy of the United States government until 1968. In my lifetime and the lifetime of 90 senators who serve today, the official policy of this government was to help white people buy homes and to deny that help to black people. And because the federal government had set the standard, private lenders enthusiastically followed in Washington's lead. Homes are the way that millions of working families build some economic security. They pay down a mortgage and own an asset that, over time, often appreciates. A home serves as security to fund other ventures, to start a small business, or to send a youngster to college. And if grandma and grandpa can hang on to the home and get it paid off, they can often pass along an asset that boosts the finances of the next generation and the one after that. And that's exactly what white people have done for generations, but not black people. Systematically, over many decades, government policies that encouraged mortgage companies to lend only to white borrowers cut the legs out from underneath minority families trying to build some family wealth. And the result has been exactly what you'd predict. It's contributed to a staggering gap of wealth between white communities and communities of color today. Here's one statistic from Massachusetts. According to the Boston Globe, the median net worth of white families living in Boston is $247,500. And the median net worth for a black family is $8. That's something that all Americans, regardless of race, should be ashamed of. When I was traveling around the country in the aftermath of the financial crisis, it became clear to me that the crash had made the problem worse. Subprime lenders who had peddled mortgages full of tricks and traps had specifically targeted minority borrowers. That meant that during the Great Recession, a huge number of minority borrowers lost their homes. And when rising home prices helped white Americans regain some financial security, communities of color, with their lower homeownership rates and their higher foreclosure rates, were often left behind. Again, just one example.
Is that you've been locked into this low level of a real-life monopoly game. You do not own and control enough of wealth. See, in 1860, for instance, black folk, as a direct result of slavery, had an ownership. When you were 98% slaves, you had an ownership of 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth in 1860 on the eve of the Civil War. Now, this is the richest country in the world, the most capitalistic country in the world. And here you are 140 years after slavery when you're supposedly 100% free and you still only have 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. You cannot compete. The typical average white person in America has 3,500 times more money than you have. That's not true only of blacks in America, it's true of the world internationally. What's happening right now is blacks is a marginalized, subordinated class of people all over the earth. You have 1/2 of 1% of wealth in this nation. The same thing is true all over the world. In the world, there's approximately $392 trillion worth of wealth on the earth. And black folk around in the world have less than 1% ownership of it. That includes all the African countries, that includes Brazil, Caribbean, and America. You don't own enough control of anything. Whites control almost 100% of all the wealth, power, resources, privileges, and controls of all levels of government. You're playing a game you can't win. You got to get reparations. Now, how are you going to get it? Let me run through 3 or 4 things very quickly because I don't want to take up the time here. First thing you must do, I've heard it mentioned already, we gotta commit a national campaign all over this country to start publicizing the issue of reparations for black folk. Not as something nice, but as a necessity, period. That means every living soul, every organization, every corps, every institution in this country must begin to start promoting reparations for black folk all over this country. That's level 1, is a massive promotion of reparations for black folk. Second level, level 2. What we must do at second level 2 now is to start having fact-finding hearings. You must have fact-finding hearings all over this country. And you're going to have fact-finding hearings on at least 2 different levels. One is you're going to go after facts-finding about what roles governments have played in the reparations, in the slavery trade against black folk, and the enslavement of black folk, the marginalization of black folk. And that should break down into 2 levels. One is to investigate all levels of domestic governments, that's city, county, federal, and state governments. And the second group would go after international. So you should have 2 groups of black folk in this country exploring and fact-finding on going internationally. On the left-hand side, you should be doing the same thing for the domestic side. You should be going after the private sector. You should be going after all the private corporations in the United States, what roles they played and how they benefited directly from slavery. And also, on the same side, you must go after all the international corporations and the roles they played and how they benefited. Now, the Harvest Institute right now, my think tank, we've already picked up one. We put out a press release on that. We're going after domestic role that major corporations played in the United States. We've already identified approximately 240 companies that are still in existence that profiteer directly and enrich themselves off of black folk. We're going after that. And what we have to do in our fact finding is be able to factuate, document the direct line between how blacks have been crippled all the way up to economically, politically, socially, and educationally, and tied into these major corporations or tied into levels of government. That's your level 2.